Who is the best character in Brawlhalla? That's a question every player has wondered at some point. But unfortunately, every player also has their own unique opinion and perspective, and I don't support that. So I consulted the opinion and perspective of objective mathematics to give me a clear answer. Using gameplay data from 9,775,968 matches, thank you Romance, and yes, we do round up here, I applied a couple formulas to parse the information and get the conclusion I needed. The actual best and worst legends in the game across the entire Brawlhalla player base. Today, I'm gonna quickly go over the math to show you how the computer calculated the best and worst, so you understand exactly what this list is measuring. Then, I'm gonna tell you what those reported worst legends in the game were, because it's kind of funny. And then we're gonna talk about each entry in the tippity top 10 and why they landed there. This should be fun. So, how was this calculation done? First, I took the win rate and the play rate of every legend in the game to find the ones that have the highest proportion of wins per player compared to everyone else. What did I just say? Basically, these are the legends that have the greatest proportion of success per time they're played. And this is what it came up with. Did you catch what's off here? No, not that. This list is nearly 1-to-1 for the list of the lowest played legends in the game, meaning my calculation puts way too much value on low play rate. Essentially, if a character isn't being played a lot, they get a massive boost in rankings, and that doesn't seem right. So instead, I employed a technique known as normalization, making the numbers normal. And trust me, it's a lot easier to do that with numbers than it is to do it to yourself. Following Google's instructions, I normalized both the win rate and the play rate to allow for more equal comparison, and then divided those variables to create a new computer-optimized composite score. Or, yeah, composite score is fine. Now we've got the list. And it's pretty interesting to see what the best legends across all players in the game are. But let's start with the worst, because in a way, it's more interesting. Immediately, characters like Mordex, Nyx, Wushang, Artemis, and Teros are down in the depths for their insane popularity compared to everyone else. They simply don't have the win percentage to make up for how many players are losing with them. It seems odd, especially Teros in recent months, but it does make a lot of sense if you think about it for a little bit. If 49 out of 100 Teroses are losing their games, and there's a lot more Teros out there than, I don't know, Dusk, there's gonna be a lot more losing Teroses than there are losing Dusks. So these legends are out of the race because their play rates are too high. Other legends like Koji, Mirage, Hattori, Jiro, and Tezuka are near the bottom because their win rates are too low. Although they aren't actually really that low, but more on that later. Here you have it. The computer's judgment on some of the worst characters in Brawlhalla across the entire player base. That leaves us with some 50 legends left to pick from. And let me tell you, some of these, especially in the top 5, are pretty shocking. After exploring that, we'll also see which weapons have the most number of top characters representing them. Without any further ado, let's jump in. Starting off our list of the best 10 legends in Brawlhalla is Sidra, with a composite score of 148.79. For context, Mordex is sitting at a score of 53, so we're in the upper echelons right now. Sidra is a classic case of a character having way too much jank and way too much cheese for how little she's played. It's really not a surprise that she's here in the top 10. If anything, it's shocking she's not higher. But it's kind of fitting to start off our list with her, because Sidra lands exactly in the middle of every single legend when it comes to popularity, right in the middle, which is maybe the best encapsulation of what we're getting at here. Characters whose players know them inside and out, but whose opponents somehow still get tricked by Cannon and Sigurd to Endlight every time they're on the ledge. I'm the opponent. In other words, Sidra is the perfect example of a hidden boss. But hidden is the exact opposite of number 9 on our list, as Queen Nai is a character that's constantly talked about for better or worse. At the highest level of play, she had a years-long streak of being called the single worst character in the game due to her 3-base speed and lack of guitar combos, but everywhere else, she's been an absolute menace. You don't get the 4th highest win rate in all of Brawlhalla for nothing. That's why it's fascinating she'd end up in the top 10. Her signatures are amazing, but the ones that get her the most number of wins in lower ranks are the exact same ones that tend to be used the least at the higher ranks. Very strange. But it seems to be that she's seeing just enough success to eke out Sidra and slither into number 9. Eke out actually isn't the best description, as Nai is quite far ahead of Sidra in terms of her composite score. Sidra beat out the couple legends below her by barely 1 point, while Nai is sitting at 4 points higher than her, which is fitting given that your average Nai player will only use 4 moves. But it's the 3 moves of Nash players that bring them up to the number 8 spot. You know what I'm talking about. Hammer N-Sig, Hammer Side Sig, and Spear Side Sig. Throw in a Spear N-Sig and a Hammer Down Sig if we're getting real cheeky, but that original trio is truly terrifying. Nash is great because he's the caveman character design with the Ooga Booga Sig spam, but then the players that main him are the calmest, most down-to-earth people you have ever encountered. It's like that opposite personality thing. If you know tennis, there's on the court, there's off the court. There's Rafael Nadal. He's a warrior on the court, but he's soft-spoken off of it. Mozart was an elegant musical prodigy, and then at home he wrote poems about poop. And I was gifted and talented in elementary school, and now I have anxiety. Perhaps that calm aura is what allows them to rack up the wins, despite not having the player resources to cite, like Scythe and Lance players often do. Regardless, Brawlhalla's first real man claims his place in the first real eggsoup analysis. But moving from man to god, we've got Thor taking number 7 with a big leap in points. Gonna be real with you, I cannot remember the last time I actually fought a Thor, much less a Thor main, so this makes some sense. He's got a fantastic weapon combo, a great set of stats, and some overwhelming signatures. A character like that is bound to have specialists who have mastered his kit well beyond the level their opponents have mastered the matchup. Thor players know Thor better than you could ever know Thor, which is kind of obviously true for most legends, but especially for Thor. Even the most basic GC N-Sig recoveries require practice spacing and technique to punish if you're able to do it at all. The God of Thunder is the first character on this list to have multiple offline championships under his belt, so he's got the baseline strength to plow through his enemies. The question then becomes, are the Thor mains collectively skilled enough to outperform the rest of the cast? Number 7 on the list says that, with the exception of the handful of legends above him, they absolutely are. When it comes to underrated legends, Isaiah might be the king. He was lauded as garbage for months, even years after his release, despite his honestly decent signature kit. Blaster's N-Sig and Cannon Down-Sig at the very least were fantastic, but after a series of significant buffs, Isaiah became legitimately a huge threat. I mean, he won a major international 1v1 LAN. That is crazy. Cannon Sidesig went from a lackluster, clunky strut to full-on zooming across the stage, and Blaster's Sidesig does not have lag frames to its name. If you haven't played against an Isaiah connoisseur, count yourself among the lucky bunch. Between the cannon locking you off stage and the Blaster getting effectively 2 extra light attacks that can also knock you out, maneuvering around Isaiah is a unique challenge that takes experience and acuity. I don't know what that word means. Experience and quick thinking. Much better. Also, he has a Master Chief crossover, and I don't have it, and I want it. So if anyone has a code, I need a code, I would like a code, please give me a... We've officially hit the big leagues. The top 5. And we're starting with everyone's least favorite legend when they remember he exists, Azoth. With the coincidentally 5th lowest play rate in the game and a win rate noticeably above 50%, it's no wonder that he'd be gauged as underrated by the computer. Axe legends like Peros and Ulgrim and bow legends like Yumiko and Diana are far more popular, taking away the spotlight that Azoth may otherwise shine under. Don't let that distract you from how good he is though. Azoth is no stranger to seeing major tournament placements, and his players are no stranger to seeing the sunrise while still on the ranked ladder, so his inclusion on this list shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. What is surprising is that low play rate. He has one of the flat out best and most spammable SIG kits in the entire game, and one of the cutest designs in all of Brawlhalla. I just don't get why he doesn't get more attention. That's no good. Lack of attention can have some real bad consequences later in life, like becoming a YouTuber. But with a score of 166.67, Azoth is not going unnoticed here. The same can be said for our fourth best character, Vector. Talking about lack of attention, this guy is literally the single least played legend in the game, and it's not really even close. There are 13 times the number of Mordexes compared to Vectors. That's insane to think about. Literally 13 times the player base. And I really don't have an answer for why. If one of you statisticians can explain how the transformer that turns into an airplane and shoots face-melting lasers is the least popular character, let me know. Maybe it's the weapon comp, but I feel like Scythe and Bow are both similar in their smooth weapon mastery appeal, and Artemis is one of the cool kids, so who knows. At least that gives me the opportunity to talk about him here. Vector was actually gonna be my secondary main until I ran out of more time to dedicate to Brawlhalla, and it's because he's just so satisfying. I'll spare you too much bias. I mean, it's my video. I can be as biased as I want, but maybe I shouldn't be. I'll just talk about 2 SIGs, okay? 2. Lance N-SIG covers a crazy angle, where if someone is trying to escape the threat of your nair, you can leap up super fast, and it's so hard to punish, and it's amazing for recovering, and it has a fun wall version that goes straight up, and Bow down SIG twirls around with much more range than you would ever think at first, and it can hit in both directions, and it goes Vector earned his spot. Also, he won a major 1v1 LAN. That too. Perhaps the most surprising entry on this entire list is Sir Roland binking number 3 in the game. I definitely did not expect this. When I think about Roland, I think about sword down SIG, sword end SIG, lance down SIG, and his slow speed. That's probably why he's so rare to find on the ladder compared to other characters, because it's definitely not his weapon comp, and it's definitely not his signatures, especially after lance side SIG just got buffed. Now that thing is insane. I think what often happens is you run into Roland players that are fully charging that sword side SIG, and you don't know which direction he's facing, or they're using that big horse lance end SIG over and over and over again, and so you just forget how good his other moves are. But it's funny because the other ones are so much better. They're some of the most standout spam buttons in all of Brawlhalla, in fact. A number of legends in this top 10 list have a higher than average defense stat, which makes sense when you're comparing something like win rates. Knocking out high defense is harder, and you need knockouts to secure the game. It can be frustrating to fight high defense characters, especially when the opponent is a level 100 master of them, so someone like Roland thrives in a calculation like this. Not to mention, his weapon comp grants him a degree of consistency and stability beyond most of the cast. Lance is best in class for range and zoning, and Sword is a jack of all trades that has some of the cleanest KO setups. You really can't go wrong with Sword plus any weapon, but Sword and Lance is an especially deadly combo, and the numbers prove it. Sir Roland somehow makes it to number 3. Now if this was my beard tier list, it'd be another story, but sadly we're talking about actual gameplay. Shameful. What isn't shameful is the collective power of the Sentinel players, because I am very happy to report that the Hammer of Justice is the computer's number 2 pick, with a composite score of 175.38. And he didn't even need to kill a kid. Sentinel was my first true main, and he's changed a lot over the years. Between the game mechanics shifting, hitbox and balance numbers shifting, he even has a double hammer side SIG that doubles his attack and more than doubles his range now. But what hasn't changed is how underrated this character truly is. He has one of the most straightforward SIG kits in the entire game, but with individual nuggets of gold in every move that make them stand out. Qatar N-SIG and Hammer N-SIG are anti-airs that also pick up from the ground. Qatar Side SIG has a brief momentum change in the middle of the move that makes it pack a more satisfying punch. Hammer Side SIG can leap over short attacks and obstacles during its animation. Qatar Down SIG can cover a billion dodges and also spikes, and Hammer Down SIG No, I'm kidding. That move can have its backward momentum cancelled and get a cheeky in-place turnaround, but it's not the best move. Luckily, one stinker sig, which it's not even that bad, isn't enough to prevent a legend from claiming a top spot. Depending on the meta, you might only need one solid sig to rise above the rest of the cast, but Sentinel definitely has more than one, and Sentinel mains will certainly let you know that. Maybe a bit too much. He's almost never in conversation during topics of balance, but the stats do not lie here. Sentinel is the epitome of a sleeper pick, and you can bet I'm quaking in my boots every time I queue into one. Number 2 is a huge achievement, and Sentinel players, you should be proud. Before I reveal the number 1 pick, let's briefly show the honorable mentions. Legends that just barely missed the cut. Ragnir, Barraza, Arcadia, Magyar, and Lord Vrax were just barely numbers 11 to 15. And rounding out the top 20 is Vivi, Dusk, Ada, Caspian, and Mako. So if it's not any of these legends, or any of the legends we just explored in the top 10, who is the statistical best in the game across the entire Brawlhalla player base? Well, it's not even close. Far and away, the legend with the highest composite score was 7, with a whopping 182.07. That's more than the difference between number 4 through number 2 combined. Where other characters may have been carried by having few players or a relatively high win rate, 7 soars over the competition by having both a bottom 50% play rate and the best win rate in the entire game. Simply phenomenal overall statistics for the 7 mains. They have completely dominated the field when it comes to success with their legend. Anything hovering around 50% plus or minus a couple percentage points is where you would ideally land in terms of win rates. But 7 has a whopping 53%, which is just insane. Think about it. There are 65 legends in the game with kits that are mostly shared amongst each other. So balance is always going to be pretty close. And even if that weren't the case, there are millions of games to balance these outliers out. You wouldn't expect any legend, even if they're in the perfect scenario of being newly released and not nerfed yet, to rise above the rest much in all of these stats. But 7 does. And she's been out for well over a year now. Despite all the numbers being diluted and dispersed among some 65 different options, she still stamps her place as a clear and uncontested number 1. And it's not like it's a surprise as to why. 7 is a hard character to play against. Her weapon combo is unusual, she has more signatures than every other character, and her stats make it incredibly challenging to find your knockouts. Going one step deeper, Spear can zone you out, Cannon is unconventional with its angles and map spanning strings, and she has her unique mode switching mechanic between lightning and fire that forces you to stay on your toes. 7 being strong is very different from a glass cannon character like Thatch or Jala being strong, because the odds of making a mistake and snowballing into losing a stock for it are far lower for our high strength, high defense engineer. She hits like a truck, she's as tanky as a truck, she looks like a truck, she can use a truck. This is just a crazy, crazy character. And clearly the statistics agree, because those who know. 7 is an anomaly among anomalies. She's very rare to find, a complete nightmare to fight against, and one of the best characters in the game on her own merits, even ignoring any kind of weapon meta. The data systematically demonstrates that she is the only character in Brawlhalla that meets all 3 of those marks. Congratulations to the 7 players for crushing the competition in overwhelming numbers. And speaking of numbers, let's take a look at the final tallies for each weapon's representatives. Amongst the top 10, Spear and Hammer sit at the top with 3, followed by Cannon, Katars, Sword, Lance, and Bow with 2, Axe and Orb with 1, and the rest with 0. Zooming out to the top 20, Spear cements its lead with 6 representatives, followed by Katars with 5, Blasters making a big showing by tying Hammer with 4, Lance, Axe, and Greatsword with 3, Cannon, Sword, Bow, and Orb with 2, Boots and Gauntlets with 1, and finally, Scythe and Chakram with 0. But that means that Scythe just has so many players that it's losing more games than any other weapon in raw numbers. Even if those players are winning a good chunk of their games, they're still losing more. That's pretty funny.